This is the special called meeting of the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections on May 19th, 2020. I am Mary Carol Cooney, chairperson, and I'm joined this morning by my colleagues Mark Wingate, Dr. Kathleen Ruth, Aaron Johnson, and Vernetta Newridden. This teleconference meeting is authorized pursuant to section 50-14-1G of the Official Code of Georgia because of the public health state of emergency declared by Governor Kemp on March 14th, which required the closure of public meeting spaces in state and local government due to COVID-19. And we are authorized because means have been afforded for the public to have simultaneous access to this conference, which Ms. Corbett assured me by email shortly before the meeting. Having said that, we are meeting so quickly we don't have an agenda, but I understand that the director determined that there were issues during yesterday's first day of early voting. And Mr. Barron, you could perhaps tell us what these are and why you need our help.
Okay, there are a few reasons I wanted to have the meeting. One is yesterday, what we've determined is that at the South Annex CT Martin, some long lines formed before the polls opened. And Alpharetta had a line, I think it started probably around noon, and they had a line in the afternoon. Garden Hills and Sandy Springs were line free yesterday. They just didn't have the turnout of the other locations. We have talked with county management with regard to, and the city of Atlanta regarding expanding some of those, the spaces in some of those locations, because with the distance restrictions that we have, and Blake observed at the South Annex yesterday, something similar to what I talked to Aaron yesterday, and he had spoken to some voters at the South Annex that said usually two people were voting at a time. What Blake observed when he was there is that there were usually 2 people checking in and 2 people voting at a time, and it seemed to be rotating. So there were usually 4 voters in the room, but 2 of them, it just seemed like it was rotating between 2 checking in, 2 voting. And they never really were able to get 4 on the machines at a time. The county will accommodate us in any way. I mean, county management is very supportive with anything. Chairman Pitts is involved in all of those meetings. Dick Anderson provides great leadership, and he's very supportive. We've been having meetings weekly with county management since the pandemic, usually, or been having them weekly lately. They've been up to 2 weeks before. But I have a few concerns. We have some solutions that we've come up with. I talked to Blake and Sharon in depth this morning about some of the things the issues that we had and some of the solutions. We feel as though opening the polling places earlier would be one of the solutions, because in particular at CT Martin and South Annex, they had lines this morning forming before 7:45. And we are opening at 9. And by the time, I think when I got off the phone with Blake, who was at CT Martin this morning, there were already 40 people in line at 8:30. And so opening early, I think we get behind the 8 ball because we're opening later. One of the reasons we wanted to, my concern when we started this early, when we reduced the locations, was to limit the exposure of our poll workers who have to be in the field for 16 days. And I am still concerned about that. We had a long meeting yesterday. What Sharon's takeaway from the meeting is that no one seems to be concerned with the health or welfare of our poll workers. And some of the things, and I really would like to get Dr. Roos, since she is our resident epidemiologist, I would like to get her input on this. At CT Martin, we can get into a bigger room. We are being pushed. I think there is some, there's a lot of political pressure that we are receiving and I understand that we don't want lines. But at the same time, I'm concerned with the welfare of our poll workers and the voters that show up. I know the AJC has reported 67 people became infected in the city of Milwaukee on April 7th from either voting or working the polls, and that is in my mind all the time. We have even tried to contact some early voting poll workers. Sharon has this morning and yesterday, and most of them are saying that they don't want to work now, even though they were committed to before, because they are worried about contracting the virus. We've taken a lot of steps to mitigate the risk to the poll workers with face shields, face masks, gloves, using styluses, having plenty of hand sanitizer there. But in listening to a biologist on CNN yesterday, he said that there's a simple formula for infection, and it basically has to do with exposure time, the concentration of it, that is what increases the infection rate. And he said usually that happens in enclosed spaces. Now, what we are being asked to do at CT Martin is to snake a line inside one side of a room and then put up to 32 ballot marking devices in another side of the room, so that we could have up to 16 people voting at a time. My concern, and from Blake's description with the snaking of that line, even with a 6 feet apart, is that we are going to get a lot of people in an enclosed space. And this is where I think Dr. Ruth's expertise can come into play, is that are we going to be putting our poll workers at risk in a room such as that? And we can also expand into behavioral health at South Annex. So we have options. The county is evaluating what we can do to expand at Alpharetta Library. Right now, Garden Hills is fine. They're in a big gymnasium, and Sandy Springs has a pretty large room as well. But my thing is, I want on record that I have a responsibility for the health of my poll workers, and I want to safeguard them because they are on the front line for hours a day in these rooms. And I know the masks afford some protection, and we have the sneeze guards, but at the same time, the more people we start packing into these rooms, I think the risk goes up for them day after day after day. And so what I would like from the board is some direction on how I've talked to Aaron, I've talked to Mary Carroll, and I would like some direction about where you want us to go, because we feel like in the interest of political expediency, the conversation regarding the health of our poll workers and maybe even the risk to the voters is being left out. And if we want to, and I want to be responsible in the decisions I make. So I want the board to give us input on how to go forward. I mean, I think our first thing is to open at least an hour earlier in the morning, possibly 2, and that could alleviate a lot of the issues that we're having. And we can do some expansion, but I mean, I think the first thing is I'd like to hear from Dr. Ruth and regarding putting more people into these rooms and get her opinion on this.
Dr. Roof, are you familiar with the facility that Rick is referencing?
CT Martin, yes.
Yes, and Mr. Barron, you said that you don't actually have a concern about Sandy Springs and Alpharetta's location and the number of poll workers and the space there.
Well, yeah, we just haven't. It's because we haven't received the turnout there hasn't been anything like the other two locations. So
yeah, Alpharetta was comparable, I think.
Yeah, and Alpharetta has a tight space, but we have to expand out into the library somewhere. They're going to have to figure out what to do because the space we have at Alpharetta Library limits the number of people that can vote there.
Rick, did Alpharetta not want this to occur at City Hall?
We didn't approach City Hall because it's our preference is to use county buildings whenever possible, just because we can use the IT network of the county if possible.
No, right. It's just that City Hall sits right by it. And there is certainly a much larger area of space in there to put machines and voters and et cetera.
Is it, and it's closed right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Will it be
well,
closed?
I say it's closed. They're not conducting businesses as normal there right now, but I'm sure, Bob and I'm sure they're in and out of there from time to time. But my question is not to argue. My question was just, has that been approached to see if that had any logic to use that instead of the library? Because that library and where that voting gets set up there, that is small. It is very, very small.
So the library will stay closed beyond June 5th. So we're able to, and the county, they're going to evaluate that space to see where we can expand in there today. But I guess.
Your expansion concerns don't apply to Alpharetta, just to CT?
No. I mean, Alpharetta, we have a lot. We were getting lines at Alpharetta too. They didn't happen until the afternoon, but my concerns are if we pack people in anywhere, and we haven't been able to evaluate the space at Alpharetta yet to see, because I think what they're going to have to do is move tables and computers and all sorts of things to accommodate us at Alpharetta Library, and that is going to be taking place this morning, that evaluation. So I want to know how we should go forward, because I think that the virus is still, it is a risk that is prevalent still. I don't think it has gone away, and I feel as though there is becoming, since we've lived with it now for a couple of months, people are relaxing, and I don't feel like we should let our guard down. And I want to know if I'm being overly cautious. So I would like to hear from Dr. Ruth as to whether I am being too cautious.
Dr. Ruth.
So I don't think that you're being too cautious. I think this is a concern. Now, in addition to maintaining or ensuring that our elections are fair, we now have the duty to ensure that elections reduce exposure to COVID-19. Can you tell me a little bit, and I am familiar with CT Martin, can you tell me a little bit about the room that they're in? Is it possible to have, it's a large space, is it possible to have voting being conducted in more than just one room?
Blake evaluated the space last night with Derek and Ellis Kirby, the deputy COO of the county. And so we could use 2 rooms still. Blake, can you talk about the main room that you looked at last night?
So the room that we looked at when you're about to enter the main entrance of the facility is off to the left. There's an exterior door, or you can go into the inside and take a left and go into it, but it's very, very large. It has a partition that probably divides the room, I would say, into about 70-30, to where you can basically have two rooms, one that's very, very large and another room that's also large. The recommendation of Mr. Webb, Municipal Clerk of Atlanta, was that we have check-in in the first room, which would be the large room, and then try to keep the line as much as possible inside so that we don't have people waiting outside, because it's rainy or it's hot, and it's just not ideal if you're waiting to be waiting outside. And so his recommendation was to try to fit people in that room as long as we could social distance them as 6 feet apart. And so what that would be that first room, which is large, having our check-in stations there, but it could be a significant number of people. And then in the next room, which would be the larger room, would be where the recommendation was to put our voting machines, which would give us, there are a decent number of outlets in there, and it would give us space to space people out, and to put a lot more BMDs in there than what we currently have.
Okay, and I've been in that larger room that you're referring to. They host a lot of community meetings in that room. So then when you walk in to CT Martin, you can also go to the right, and there's this open space around the stairwell that's to the right, if I remember correctly. Is it possible, it's very open, is it possible to set up another voting location in that area?
So if I'm following you right, when you walk in and turn to the right and you go through that open space and you keep walking, you run into the room that we're currently in, which it's not a small room where we're currently at. It's just when you're trying to socially distance, it makes things a little bit more difficult. So, in that same vein, if we wanted to attempt something like that, then we could potentially stay where we are and then also be in another room. That would be something different and unusual, but this whole thing is unusual, and it could potentially help us out. Director Barron, and you may see my name on here twice, but I think that's Sharon, that's the other Blake Evans, because she's using my link. But Director Barron and Sharon, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think it would be creative, and it could potentially work. But we do.
Can I interrupt and ask a question, please? I'm very familiar with the big room to the left. When you say going to the right, are you talking about the area that kind of overlooks the swimming pool?
So, Mary Carol, there's a game room that they're currently in. And I thank you, Dr. Roof, for suggesting that perhaps splitting it, because that game room has a separate entrance, and the Cleveland Auditorium, which is the room that Rick is referencing, has its own entrance and exit. And I was thinking perhaps A through J and, K through Z or something in that respect. But that social distancing inside, I understand Rick's concern with the line forming on the inside, and it's legitimate. Such a gigantic space. It's just, I think we can fix it. We can fix it.
Yeah, and especially if there are different areas, if it has a separate exit and entrance, that's even better, because you can have signs for those people, for a group of people to come in a different entrance and leave out of that entrance. They don't even have to go past the other people that are in line. So that decreases exposure dramatically, having two separate areas where people can vote.
Let me ask this question. What does that do about getting done voting and carrying your ballot to the scanner?
So
You-
the next steps would be, and I'll let Sharon and Director Barron chime in as well, but the next steps would be if we wanted to look into that, would be making sure with the City of Atlanta that we could use both spaces in that facility. We'd also have to, City of Atlanta IT is assessing the large room today for us to make sure that we could have our check-in tables in that larger room and where we would need them. As far as the scanners, I mean, if we're able to pull this off, the scanners would basically be set up the same. So it'd be the same voting experience. It'd just be two different places. So you'd mark your ballot and you take it to a scanner in that same room.
Yeah, we have to have twice as many scanners for this election as normal because the way this election has been set up, we've got 2 elections that the scanners have to handle that are 2 different primaries with three political parties. So they had to split it so that the scanners are one scanner is for the City of Atlanta residents and the other scanners are for all other Fulton County residents in order to, because of memory problems. This is one of those, because there are 2 elections set inside this, the memory is at capacity or greater than capacity. So we would end up having to have 4 scanners in there, which to space those apart, it takes up more room as well.
I raised the question because my concern all along with this election was the vision of voters getting done and then wandering off premises with their ballots, unaware of, where and how to actually vote them.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to bring up too is that there are a lot of voters that are confused about the election date. Many think today is election day. We received lots of calls yesterday because the ballots that have been mailed to voters say May 19th on them. And so there is confusion with regard to the delay in the election to June 9th. And I think that is causing a lot of consternation amongst voters, according to the calls that Ralph and his staff received yesterday. And so we aren't sure whether after today that the voting the in-person voting will slack off, or whether it's just going to keep going as it is. But we think that is a factor in this.
Okay.
And I do recommend, I am definitely in favor of voting, extending the hours of operation. And I would even do it 2 hours early. We find that with some of the grocery stores, they're opening 2 hours early to accommodate seniors. We could encourage seniors to come in that early as well, to give them an opportunity to vote and not stand in long lines.
Right. Okay, so we can extend hours. We talked this morning about either opening at 7 or at 8. I think opening at 7 is going to alleviate the lines that we've had that have formed before 8 o'clock in the morning at the 2 locations at South Annex and at CT Martin. We had a lot of people in line at both places at 7:45 already. So we will definitely open early. Dr. Ruth, with regard to the room at CT Martin, you're comfortable if we set up 32 BMDs and then snake the line inside? That's you think the room's large enough to accommodate that? Blake said there would probably end up being, with the spacing, there could be 30 people in line in that room. And so
it's a pretty large room, if I remember correctly.
okay.
Um,
I just want to make, I just
yeah,
want to
and I
make
would just-
responsible, educated decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that people wear face coverings, that we encourage that. If a person doesn't have their own face covering, we have to offer them a face covering. I think that's very important. Ensuring that people who are in line, that they're 6 feet apart. So if we do all of the mitigation and take all of the necessary precautions, I think for me yesterday when I voted, the longest time that I was at a particular station really was when I scanned my ballot. I mean, that takes a few seconds for that ballot to cast.
Okay.
Probably about 25, maybe 30 seconds. That was the longest place that I stood. So if we can keep that moving and ensure, our line managers, they have to be assertive, make sure that people are standing 6 feet apart, ensure that anyone who is over 65 and over, that they get through the line first. I think that's important. And also, if we have the 2 separate rooms, I think that's really important for people to vote. So having 2 separate rooms set up is really important and will hopefully take a lot of the pressure off people standing in lines.
Okay.
And
Kathleen, how long did it take when you started the vote process yesterday? How long did it take you through the scanning to get done?
Oh, I mean, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. I wasn't in there long at all.
But there was no line at Garden Hills.
There was no line. There was absolutely
I understand.
no line.
I'm just curious for you how long it took you through the entire process. You're saying start to finish 5 minutes.
5 to 7 minutes. Yeah. I mean, it was not I spent a little time talking, just to the poll workers, asking them about their experience and if they felt safe and comfortable, and they all said that they did.
Well, you're a little more you're a little more up on candidates and things like that, because this is a long ballot.
Right.
I calculated in Alpharetta that the average voter that came through there yesterday was spending 12 minutes. That's an average.
Yeah.
Because you got a long ballot, you've got the distancing, you've got all the check-in requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So that's not a scientific number. It's just what happened in Alpharetta yesterday after I got a telephone call from a candidate last night about 7:30 and was telling me that there was a problem in the morning with the line. There was a problem in the afternoon with the line, and the scanner was inoperable, and they were sticking the ballots, the paper ballots, the scannable ballots, in a box.
In the emergency bin.
Yeah, Rick. And I said, fine. So when Rick last night thankfully sent the numbers in terms of vote count at each of the 5 locations, I just did a quick calculation based on an 8-hour voting window. And that turned out to be about 12 minutes per voter going through that day. And all I'm saying is because we have it's a fairly long time that somebody is engaging and getting through the entire process.
Yeah,
and
no, I think
small
yesterday,
streets like Alpharetta, it's just
Alpharetta, I think, sent their numbers in last. I think they were the last to finish processing voters yesterday. And I think Sharon's on here, she can confirm it, but I think it was about 5:45, which was an hour and 15 minutes after the polls closed, before they were able to shut down.
Okay.
So the ballots that were in the emergency bin, what's the process after that? So another employee scanned them in individually, or?
Sharon, are you on? What's supposed to happen is the poll workers then will scan those once it's operational. Are you on, Sharon?
Okay.
I think I hear her on a phone call, Rick, with a poll manager, but that's correct.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the actual voter puts their ballot in a box, and
Yeah,
then other poll workers are able to see how they voted, and then those poll workers manipulate that ballot and then feed it into the scanner. The actual voter is not putting it into the scanner, and the ones that are placed in the emergency bin.
So if a scanner goes out, the emergency procedures put the ballot into an emergency bin, or the voter at least has the option to do that. If they don't want to, they can wait until the machine is fixed and
They can
in
take their
operation.
ballot.
The voter takes their physical ballot, puts it in the emergency bin, or they can choose to wait. Once the machine is running again, the poll workers will tabulate the ballots. But you know, it's kind of like absentee voting at that point. You have no idea whose ballot's assigned to who.
Sharon, did you just get on? I saw another Blake connecting to audio.
Yes, I'm on.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you speak to the emergency bin process? Do you want to add anything to what Blake said?
Basically, Blake kind of hit it on exactly what we do. But in addition, if we do have voters in the poll, we will announce that we're getting ready to scan the emergency ballot, just in case we have a poll watcher or an observer.
And Sharon, you, I guess I want to get your voice in here real quick too. You talk to the poll workers all day long. And is there anything that you want to add to what I've said or to what Blake has said with regard to how the poll workers are feeling?
My number one concern is just safety. We just need to make sure that we do everything in our power to not to compromise the safety and the health of the poll workers, of course, in addition to voters. And of course, anyone who is involved in the election process. And that's my main concern. Whatever decision we make, I'm going to look at a health issue.
And most people wore masks yesterday. There were very few that
we did had one who did not wear a mask, and when they asked, she told them, it was a female, that she just didn't want to wear a mask. So that was a little uncomfortable for that particular location, only because, you know, she felt that she didn't have to wear a mask. So that's where my safety comes in.
Sharon, was she offered a mask? Did you all offer her a mask? Or?
Yeah, they was getting towards that. But of course, if a voter is
Sharon, was she offered a mask?
She was.
Did you all offer her a mask?
She was, but she just didn't want getting towards that. But of course, if the voter is
Sharon, was she offered a mask?
She was.
I think Dr. Ruth become a ventriloquist.
I was wondering where that was coming from.
She's not harassing you, Mr. Benjamin. She's just echoing. Okay, so we know this lady was offered a mask and declined. But that was the only experience that you're aware of, Ms. Benjamin, is that correct?
Only experience I were of yesterday, yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, I know that Mr. Johnson has another obligation, and is there anything you would like to tell us?
Well, I want to make sure Ms. Nuridan is finished. I know she was talking when Ms. Benjamin came in.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I had a question. Mr. Barron, I know that you called the meeting because you were concerned about adding the additional machines to Adamsville. Did you have a counter suggestion to resolve the problem?
I think what I wanted to do was hear. I really wanted to hear from Dr. Ruth, because it was my understanding she was an epidemiologist, although I wasn't 100% sure. And and then I also wanted to get feedback from the board on going forward with this plan. I mean, it makes I know when Sharon and Blake and I talked this morning, Sharon and I were concerned about poll worker exposure. And so
specifically at CT and
this is at all the places, but since we're going to move into a larger room, my specific concern at CT Martin was the desire there to snake a line inside the building into an enclosed space. And that it just sounded like having 30 people snaking through that. And I know that Blake was there last night, but I know that there are board members that are more familiar with that space. And I wanted to be comfortable moving forward with a plan to expand the number of machines there without, increasing the risk to voters that are there and our poll workers. So
but you're going to use another room, right? You're going to use another room too.
Yeah, they're gonna move us into the big, huge room. It is possible we can stay in the one room. The thing is that Sharon, you contacted some of your poll workers yesterday about working at CT Martin, and only one said that they would come in of the people that you contacted, correct? Because we're going to have to expand. How many people are we going to need to expand at CT Martin? The South Annex, we know we have to add at least one person there with the expansion into the behavioral health. We will have to get more workers at Alpharetta. I think we're fine right now at Sandy Springs and Garden Hills because they aren't having the turnout. So,
and is it possible because they're not having the turnout at Garden Hills? I mean, there were a number of extra people there. Is it possible to move a few of those people to CT Martin to help with the burden there?
I wouldn't move them because that was just day one. We have
Okay.
3 weeks of early voting because I know Garden Hills being the Buckhead area, the last week of early voting, we are actually going to have people coming out. So I would have to take an assessment to see how much machines we're going to put at CT Martin if we're going to use the other room, and then see what we have available and just try to contact staff who told me earlier that it was available and see, let's go from there. So after I take the assessment, I can answer that question. If we have staff available or not.
So also yesterday, Mr. Barron, there were several Fulton County librarians that were volunteering outside. They may have been working. I just wanted you to consider that as a resource. And
we're paying them. We have one of them is in a line manager duty. The other one is there to answer questions for the voters. So we wanted to have people out there that could interact with the voters out in the line, because we assumed that we would have some lines. I think the length of them was a little bit of a surprise to all of us. So but we are paying the library staff to be there.
Great, and also too, and I do definitely respect Dr. Ruth's position as an epidemiologist and her input here. I definitely value that. I strongly encourage the department to rely on the Fulton County Health Department as it relates to the inside of the poll and how that's set up. So I'm not sure, you say you were waiting to hear what Dr. Ruth had to say, but I'm hoping that you can work with the Fulton County Health Department to make sure that, and that should be your first line of communication, to make sure that they're safe. But I
contacted Daryl Carver before the meeting to see if we could get somebody from the Fulton County Health Department or the director on this call. I know Jessica's on there. I don't know if Daryl was able to get a hold of anyone.
Yeah, so what I'm fearful of is that we focus on 16 and 32 machines, and then we just don't even increase it by 5 machines. ballots because we're trying to reach an unrealistic number. So is it possible that, and thank you for just being open to having 2 spaces. I know it hasn't been done before, but you know, even if we can't get as many as were suggested, then perhaps we can still double and triple it in size.
Well, we can, I mean, in that room, Derek and Ellis Kirby and Blake walked the room last night, and they determined that we could get 32 BMDs into the one space, and that would enable us to have 16 people at a time voting in there. Because of the way we would set them up, we would have, there would be a machine, we wouldn't have people right next to each other, because the way the carriers are, you know, under normal conditions, we can have 4 people on a 4-station carrier, but now we can only have 2. So we can set those units up in a way that will allow for 16 people to vote, but they will also have a choice of which machine they vote at in there when they enter.
And just so you guys know, at the end of the day at CT, the line was moving, still slow, but not as slow as that morning. So it wasn't 2 and 3 hour delays in the afternoon from what I witnessed. It was still a delay, but for instance, the line that wrapped around the front of CT, it was only 20 people in that line. So when we add those additional machines, at least I hope that we won't still have those lines because we can get more in there at once. So for instance, just 20 people wrapped the line around the front of the building. So nothing like the 67 they had down at Fulton, at South Fulton.
Yeah,
But
there were at one point, there were 80 people in line at South Fulton. And I think the peak got up to a little over 50 at CT Martin at one point.
right.
And I think what happened too is if you have a long line at the opening of the polls, that's when it's hard to clear that initial line, and so it takes several hours to catch up. And I think that's why we need to open earlier.
Are
And
we getting any
having
feedback
But,
this morning?
hold on, 'cause I've been very patient. I'm trying to get in here. And I'm sorry that I have to be quick today. My son is graduating, and we got to get to that a little later on in a little bit. So we got to go pick up a diploma. A couple things I want to throw in real quick is that, number one, the first thing that was mentioned is there was concern about the board. There was some concern about whether the board is taking into consideration the health and welfare of the poll workers as well as the voters. And I just want, hold on, I got you. I wrote it, trust me, I have very great notes. That contention, I just want to be clear, is not the case. The thing that I know for myself, and I would assume most of the board members, is that when I personally drove down to the South Fulton Service Center, I witnessed over 50 people in line. I talked to people as they walked out of the building. I talked to staff that was at the building. And what they were saying is, in essence, we can do better. So I hope that this meeting comes to a point that we can do better. I understand that we want to be mindful of everyone's safety during this time. That makes complete sense. But we also have to be mindful that we have a responsibility to voters. And in that responsibility, we have to let them know that we're doing everything we can, not only for them, not only for the poll workers, but for their ability to vote. And 50, 60, 80 people in line, granted, I understand that when you open the door and it's already a line, there is going to be a line. But when you're only allowing 2 people to vote at a time, and I know that the poll workers were saying that it was 4 people at a time, but even 4 people is not enough. But every single person that walked out of there, including a sheriff's deputy, all said there were only 2 people being allowed to vote at a time. So we can go back and forth about that, but I'm just going by the people who physically walked out of the building and the staff that was there. So what I think we need to do, and I think additionally with people not receiving their ballots, the constant delays that we've had with people not receiving the ballots, they feel like literally while I was on this call just now, state representative called me because somebody was standing next to him that wanted to go and vote, but they just got their ballot yesterday, but they plan on going to physically vote in the building. So we have to keep that in mind when we're planning. I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it again today. A lot of people the people that will go to the C.T. Martin auditorium or community rec center, and the people that will go to the South Fulton Service Center are not people that trust the process. They don't trust that their ballots are getting, their applications are getting received and processed in a timely manner. They're not trusting that they're going to get their ballots. They're not trusting that the ballots that they get are going to get back and be counted. So even when, and you remember now, they were sent the applications, they didn't ask for them. The applications were sent to them. So we got to stop looking at the numbers and saying, well, we have this large number of applications. You have it because it was sent, not because it was requested. And I think it's evident based on the fact that, if I'm correct, Ralph acknowledged that they had a lot of people who received that ballots they had to cancel yesterday because of people showing up to vote, even though they received an absentee ballot. So I'm submitting to the board, and I hope we move in a direction that people are not going to turn those ballots in. I know we have 20 ballots drop boxes. They are not going to put them in the drop boxes. We have people who got their ballots. They are literally taking the ballot. At least two people yesterday had their ballot in their hand while they were standing in line to go and vote inside the building. But all that to say is a couple of things that I think we need to do to help with the process. We're already talking about extended hours, which is amazing. I pray that we can get that done. We're talking about moving into larger facilities. I think that between the office and the health department, we can figure out a way to get more people into a room, even if it's 10, 16, I would love. 10 would be great. And I'm going off the number 10 and I'm looking at all the places, and I understand we have to be mindful of people's safety, our poll workers' safety. I truly, truly think about all of that. But we also got to be mindful of the 81-year-old man that was standing in line yesterday that Ms. Nuridan sent out, or the seniors that I saw, or the lady that missed her son's award ceremony yesterday because she was standing in line and she wanted to make sure she could vote because she knew she couldn't come back again. We also have to be mindful of those people. So in that, if we can get chairs, something, I know they got them at C.T. Martin, but at the South Fulton Service Center, just a few chairs spread out. Some men will give them up for women, some younger people will give them up for old people, but at least have some out there because the line was wrapped around the building. Water. There were people yesterday at, I won't say for any other place because I wasn't there, but at the South Fulton Service Center, they stood in the rain, literally waiting to vote. And again, we've already talked about the machines, and we're talking about more machines where they're needed. And we need a little better line management. What I saw yesterday, specifically, there were two workers outside working the lines, but they only worked the line as right by the door and maybe 2 or 3 people down the line. I was there for probably half an hour. I didn't see anybody walk down the line just to say, hey, how you doing? Sorry, gotta wait. I know you're gonna get, I even got cussed out yesterday, and it was okay because the lady literally had gotten at the location yesterday at 9:20, and at 1 o'clock she was walking out. So we have to fix that. But have them go down the line. If they see seniors, pull them out of line because some seniors don't know that they can come to the front. If somebody looks like they need some water, maybe grab them some water. Somebody looks like they need a chair, maybe say, hey, you can sit over here. Maybe we do something like give people numbers as they get in line, or at least to a certain point. That way, if they want to kind of move around a little bit, I know that's hard. Trust me, I know that part is hard, trying to make sure that people come up, but maybe not do that, but do something to kind of engage people while they're standing in line. And I know some people may think, well, he thinks that's easy because he's never had to do it before. That's not true. I've done it before, so I know that it is possible. So if we could just do a couple of things like that on top of getting more people, more machines inside and the expanded hours, I think it will help us out tremendously. Lastly, apparently the issues, I don't know how it works with getting backup machines, but apparently there were multiple issues with machines yesterday. I don't know how that works, but I don't know if we can have an extra machine waiting, considering it's not election day yet, but that's just an idea. But those other things that I just mentioned, if we could do that, the chairs, the water, the larger facilities, more machines, and having an additional printing or scanning, whichever one, if that's possible, we need to do everything we can. One of the other things that was mentioned is political pressure. Yes, there is going to be a lot of political pressure. There's history of certain areas not getting the resources that they need. This unfortunately looks like that. I don't think that's the case right now, but that's what it looks like. Granted, more people showed up at CT Martin than they did at Garden Hills. Well, we need to accommodate. We can't have the same amount of people voting at CT Martin that we have at Garden Hills. I mean, I think we've talked about it before. Folks were going to show up today. So I just hope if I have to leave and I don't get to say anything else the rest of the day, that we work very hard, not only to protect our poll workers, but to do everything we can to make sure voters have the ability to vote in less than 3 hours.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I have to ask you a question because I am aware of your time restriction. The second thing you talked about was larger facilities, and I think that our discussion was centered on CT Martin. Is there any place else in particular that we need to have in front of Mr. Barrett about that?
Well,
apparently it's South Fulton Service Center as well, because that room is full.
Both of those.
They've cleared. The county was going to start clearing behavioral health out last night, so we could expand into the behavioral health portion of the South Annex. And then this morning, we were going to be, the county was going to look at the space at Alpharetta Library to see how we can adjust the voting area there as well. Garden Hill has plenty of room because the school is closed and they put us in the gymnasium.
To follow up on that,
go ahead.
I was just going to add to what Director Barron said. While I was at CT Martin this morning, Ellis Kirby with the county manager's office showed up to just kind of check on things while I was there, and I was talking with him. He had came from South Annex, and they'd already started moving items out of that room. And then there was also, by the time I left, there was already water there. So
yeah, he was clearing water too, correct, Blake?
Correct. He brought it, and it was there this morning at CT Martin. And then in regards to the, I'm sorry, but I did want to address, just in case Mr. Johnson wants to jump off, that you mentioned the scanners and the equipment, and we did see some scanner jams in multiple locations, which is part of learning about the new system. One of the things that we did when we had in March was we put a backup scanner to every location, two scanners at every location, except for Fairburn because it was small and we're tight on space. One of the things that I've never dealt with before and until this election with paper ballot scanners is having an election that's so large, because like Director Barron said, it's so large that the scanner can't handle the capacity of all the ballot styles. And so we have 2 scanners at every location this time. The only problem is one scanner can only take City of Atlanta ballots. The other scanner can only take ballots outside the city of Atlanta. So I say all that just to say, by the end of yesterday, yes, we decided we're just going to put 4 scanners in every location. That way there will be a backup of every kind. So we got to that. And then we're still trying to figure out why exactly those ballots were jamming. This is the first time with a 19-inch ballot on these machines, so that might have part of it. But I did want to address those few concerns with the South Annex room, the water, and the scanners.
Yeah, and Derek was in contact with the state yesterday, and the state was consulting with the vendor regarding our scanner issues. So that is being dealt with right now, all the way to the state level and with the vendor. So we with the way that they've had to program the scanners in Fulton, it's created. We have so many precincts and 2 elections on there at the same time with 3 parties for both of those elections. This is something that I don't think was ever anticipated by the vendor when these scanners were designed. So it's created issues.
Okay,
I know Mr. Wingate had something. I wanted to add it after he.
No, that's my question was, Rick Blake, are we getting any feedback at all this morning on any of the locations? Anything going on?
Sharon, I mean, I know we already had lines, at least 40 people each at the South Annex and CT Martin by probably 8:30 to 8:40 this morning.
And I just got a report that there's 61 in line currently, and the past 30 minutes, 10 people have exited the poll. So currently at South Fulton Annex, there's 61 people in line.
And we are going to be able to, by the end of the day today, we will be, and it could happen earlier in the day, but we are preparing BMDs to go into those locations already.
May I add that I talked to Chairman Pitts of the Fulton County Commission right before our meetings started, and last night talked to Commissioner Carnes, both of whom begged me to tell them what they in the county could do to help us. I don't know what the water supply is specifically. I don't know how many persons might additionally be needed to walk lines. Those appear to me to be things that could be supplied that we can ask for, but I want to convey that anything at all that we need was offered to us.
Yeah, and we have 2 library staff that can walk the entire lines, and we'll make sure that they engage the entire line rather than just closer to the door. We did assign 2 library staff to each location, and actually there are 4, but they're working in there's 2 different shifts. So we will make sure that
actually we have 4, 2 line managers and 2 parking lot attendants. And just to clarify with South Annex, speaking with the manager, we only have 20 voters waiting in line at South Annex right now. Just for clarification.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Barron, have we given you what you need this morning?
I have one more question, please,
Okay.
Before you close out.
Sure.
So one of the delays, and Mr. Johnson, he touched on it briefly. One of the delays was voters who turned in their application but didn't receive the ballot. So I'm hoping that you consider having a separate place for them to vote, because I hear an additional phone call has to be made for that original ballot to be canceled in order for them to vote. And right now they are slowing up. They're slowing up the line if there are only 2 machines. So I know you guys are adding machines, and thank you so much for that. Can we, before you leave, get a timetable as to when that's going to happen? I heard Ms. Benjamin say that she still had to do a site visit. I'm not sure where, but just a timetable as to when we can expect the new machines, and also consider adding the adding a separate location for folks who were issued a ballot who don't have it. So if they actually have the ballot in their hand, I don't think you guys have to call. They can just turn in the physical ballot and then vote. So they don't have that delay of having to wait for someone to call in. But just consider that. And if you would just briefly discuss the timetable and when we can expect the changes to happen.
I think we'll have all the changes in place to begin tomorrow morning. I mean, when we can get Jessica to publicize that we will open the polls earlier, and then we can get all the equipment out there. From my discussion with Blake and Derek last night, I don't think there's any issues with us getting equipment out to the polls today. That's correct, right, Blake? You're muted.
I just muted myself. I know Derek is working right now on CT Martin, and then he'll transition into working on equipment for South Annex. And so he's working on that today, and that shouldn't be a problem.
And then as soon as we hear about how they can change the configuration at Alpharetta Library, then we will work on that location as well.
All right.
And I just want to stress again for CT Martin, the importance of taking advantage of the multiple entrances and exits so that people can keep moving throughout the process.
Yes, and one of the thing, we ran into a couple things too at CT Martin yesterday, and I think it was the facility director there had asked all the voters to wait outside because of the children that they were feeding, and then nobody was being allowed to use the restrooms. So we did get them to help us with the bathrooms so that people could use the bathrooms. And then we got chairs because the lines were moved outside. But I think we'll get all of this solved during the day today and have everything ready to go for tomorrow morning. Jessica, you just showed up on video. Did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to respond to really quickly a couple of things that were mentioned about communications. So several members of the press are actually monitoring this meeting right now. So I know that there's been a lot of interest in what we're doing. I did reach out. Daryl let me know that you wanted to ask some questions of the health department. As you can imagine, this is also a team, so they were not able to join this meeting. But we can certainly take any questions back to them. We're in constant communication with them. And I've asked our team to kind of be prepared to support with some sense of urgency all of the things that to respond to the things we saw yesterday. We know that your voter education and outreach team has been limited because of all the restrictions we've all been working under, but we're prepared to make a lot of updates to the website today. We've already drafted kind of a statement about these modifications. We'll be doing an email blast and next door and all of those things we can to try to just strengthen the communication. I think we've seen some gaps in voter understanding. So this will give us an opportunity to respond to those and kind of tailor our communications to help accommodate that.
Great, that's wonderful, Jessica.
Mr.
Yeah,
Johnson.
I think it's been, one of the, I think the May 19th date being published on the ballot has created a number of issues for us. And that's unfortunate that date had to be published on the ballot because it has confused a lot of people.
Let's hear from Mr. Johnson before he has to jump
Uh,
off.
yeah, real quick. I have 7 more minutes.
Okay.
Jessica, I just wanted to say, Jessica, thank you. I wanted to add, I don't know if this is on your normal email list or even if you have access, but definitely send it to the different parties, but also if you have the emails to the candidates, because the candidates will start reaching out to a lot of people as well. So that may be one option. And Rick, I just wanted to reiterate something Chair Cooney said about asking the county manager and the chairman about resources, even if it's little as the chairs and the water and all of that, just making sure you tell the county manager, just every staff, anything you need, let them know so you can at least have put in the request and we can get a lot.
Yeah, and we had a lengthy meeting with Chairman Pitts and the county management staff, county executive managers yesterday, after the polls closed. So we will be in close contact with them.
Also to Director Barron, and thank you all board and Jessica for making this happen so quickly. I just have a picture and I need to really stress this. Ms. Benjamin said the poll manager just told her that there were 20 people in line. And I just received a picture with over 100 people in line at South Fulton. I'm forwarding it to you guys now. So apparently there's some miscommunication between what your deputies are being told and what's actually happening. So I know Sharon made a point to clarify that there were only 20 people in line. And I have someone who just sent me an email. They're watching YouTube on their phone from the line. So they heard her when she said that. And they snapped 2 pictures and attached it to me on social media. So I just want to make sure that the information is true and accurate, what's being presented to your staff. And I just wanted you to know that. That's coming to you guys in just a second. But that line is out to the street, down the street.
Okay.
And I do appreciate that, Vanetta, because we all in this together.
Right.
So I'm gonna reach out to South Annex, because that's what teamwork is all about with DreamWorks. So I'm gonna make sure that clarification is actually accurate in reference to when I relay that information to anyone on staff.
Thank you, Sharon.
And thank you.
All right. Thank you all for coming together so quickly.
And I will send out an update either later this afternoon or early this evening regarding the progress we've made and what we will be doing beginning tomorrow.
Okay. Anything else that we need to do or say? And hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And I appreciate you guys getting on here so quickly this morning, taking the time to let us hear your input.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn on the table.
Thank you.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. And thank you to Jessica and to Mr. Rico Dollar for making this happen.